Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing and a brand new installment, another brand new episode in the marvelous X-Men review series. Hope y'all are having a great week. We are on Hump Day. It is Wednesday night. And before we get started, I want to most sincerely apologize for all of the delays, all of the reschedulings for this review, for this stream. But for those of you who work retail like I do, the last couple of weeks this past week especially, leading up to the 4th of July, was an absolute beast. And even I have my limits, unfortunately. But I am live tonight with you all. I hope you all enjoy the stream as always. And of course, if this is your first visit to the Ambassadorial Wing and you enjoy this stream, hit that like button. Share this out with all of your friends who are fans of Marvel, fans of X-Men, or fans of the baddest mother effer this side of the Canadian border, the Wolverine, aka Logan, aka Mr. Hugh Mother effing Jackman. And tonight, we're going to be breaking down, we're going to be discussing by far, I think, one of the best films in the X-Men franchise, and a film that only features, technically, one X-Man. And quite clearly, the face of the X-Men franchise, and that is, of course, the Wolverine. And to get started, for those of you that tune in tonight, if you want to join the discussion, if you want to join the stream, see the chat? Link is there. Hit it, get on in here, and let's talk the Wolverine. But with that being said, we do not stand on a lot of ceremony here in the Ambassadorial Wing. We don't do long intros that just drag on for hours on end. We get into the topic. So, with that being said, let's do it. That was my Wolverine doing his claw thing. Or my attempt, anyway. Let's talk the Wolverine. And if you've been following this review series thus far, we have talked X-Men, we have talked X2, we have talked First Class. I did a upload review on my thoughts on X-Men Last Stand and X-Men Dark Phoenix, of course. So definitely go check out that review and let me know what your thoughts are on those two films in particular. But tonight we are covering the Wolverine. And to start off, when they announced that they were doing a solo Wolverine film, I was nothing if not enthused, because I think for most everybody who is a Marvel fan, especially for those of us who are X-Men fans, this is the one character, if not the character, that we all key to. This is quite literally the face of the franchise when it comes to X-Men, the Wolverine. Of course, they captured lightning in a bottle when they cast Mr. Hugh Jackman as the titular character, the Wolverine, Logan. Well, and for those of us who know the deep history of the character of Logan, his birth name, James Howlett. But as I was doing research for this film, of course, I did rewatch this film because, well, I don't review movies that I don't watch. Even though I may have watched them in the past, it's been a while since I had watched the Wolverine. So I definitely wanted to give it a rewatch, one, so I could bring you all a good review, but also because this is a film I deeply, deeply enjoyed. And this movie takes place several years in terms of production after the train wreck that was X-Men The Last Stand, but takes place also within the time period of the X-Men reboot universe. That, of course, starting with X-Men First Class. And this is definitely Logan's story. This is definitely Wolverine's story. But this is also a story that a lot of X-Men, especially a lot of Wolverine fans, had been hoping that maybe somewhere down the road, someone would do a adaptation of. And as I was doing my research for this film, they had interviewed Chris Claremont, who, for a lot of us who are fans of the X-Men universe, was kind of the granddaddy of the modern, or at least the 90s iteration of the X-Men team. And the 90s was also a very interesting time in terms of comic books. Comic books were getting a lot more darker, a lot more grittier, a lot more hard edged. And they were when they interviewed Claremont, he unveiled the story of how the comic book run that inspired this film came to be. And for those of you who may not know this, who haven't watched the special features, or maybe just aren't aware of it, Chris Claremont was giving Frank Miller, yes, the Frank Miller, a ride back from a Comic Con that they were both at. I don't think he mentioned which Comic Con it was per se, but Claremont was writing this idea for the two of them to collaborate on an X-Men story, in particular a Wolverine story. And at first, Frank Miller, was not all that hep to the idea. However, as Claremont kind of laid out the idea for this story and everything, where Logan travels to Japan, and it's a solo story. It's just him. It's not anybody else. It's not anyone else in the X-Men team. Miller's like, okay, you've convinced me. Of course, Miller would go on to do the artwork. I think we all know Frank Miller's talents as a comic book artist. They are, well, if I'm not being too much of a fanboy here, they are second to none. And of course, Chris Claremont as a storyteller in terms of comic books, and in particular the X-Men universe, also second to none. As I said just a few minutes ago, Chris Claremont was the godfather. He was the daddy. He was the big daddy of the 90s X-Men universe, and quite frankly, that's where I came in. Everything as an X-Men fan. Now, granted, I did know of the X-Men universe, and I've talked about the X-Men universe in previous streams. You can go check them out. They're all on the Marvel and DC playlists and everything on my channel. But the thing that I found truly intriguing was when what was then 20th Century Fox had the idea to do this story, or rather, when James Mangold and the writers came up with this idea, 20th Century Fox greenlit it, obviously, or I wouldn't be here talking about the movie. But they gave Mangold a lot of creative freedom. But Mangold wanted to stay as true to the story that Miller and Claremont told in that comic book run as he possibly could, but also add his own little touches to it. And I would say they are touches that are completely and totally appropriate. Now, of course, obviously, you've got Hugh Jackman back as the Wolverine, but primarily, except for him, and well, actually, I do correct myself. There's one, minus a post-credit or a mid-credit scene. There is one other X-Man that does make an appearance throughout this film in dream sequences, and that is, of course, Jean Grey, Famke Janssen's character. And this does follow to a degree the continuity of X-Men: The Last Stand, but it's only in the context of the fact that Logan, for those of us who know that movie, whether you love it or hate it, he had to kill Jean, and he is still haunted by the decision to kill Jean. And in the aftermath of the events of Last Stand, Logan has gone off the grid. He has given up his life as a hero. He has given up his life as an X-Man, and he has pretty much just gone off into the woods and is living as a hermit, essentially. Now, the interesting thing is, and this is part of the story that I know relatively well, as I have read, though I do not own a copy of the Wolverine storyline that this movie depicts. But there's a sequence in this film that I found deeply intriguing and I thought was very appropriate for this story. As I mentioned, Logan is living as a hermit at this point, and he sees this group of hunters, and obviously rookie hunters. They're not serious hunters to any degree whatsoever. And they go off into the woods, and they've got their guns and they got their bows and arrows and so on. And Logan's walking back to his cave, to his den that he's staying in the woods. And he hears a bunch of screaming. So he goes to investigate, and he finds a campsite that has been completely ransacked, utterly destroyed. And not too far away from the camp, the ruins of the campsite, he finds a injured grizzly bear, big one. And he finds a arrow that has been shot into the bear. And unfortunately, these novice hunters have decided to dip their arrow in some sort of poison, and it didn't kill the grizzly bear. Instead, it drove it nuts. It sent it into a rabid state. And Logan takes the arrow out of the bear, and he puts the bear out of its misery. But then he goes hunting himself. And when he gets to the bar where the surviving hunters are at, this one hunter that survived the bear attack is retelling the story about how they barely survived and how he got away and how he killed the bear. Logan corners him. And for those of you who know the movie, and this for me is honestly a very iconic scene, it's, this movie really brings to the forefront the type of story we wanted to see Logan in, and not to mention how we wanted to see the Wolverine depicted. Without all the flashy costumes, without the other X-Men, just him on his own essentially, but also in a much more brutal frame of mind. We get to see the truly animalistic, the truly brutal aspect of Logan's personality as the Wolverine. And I have to say, Hugh Jackman's performance in this film, I mean, we will obviously, when we get to Logan, and we will get to Logan in due course, trust me, guys and gals, Hugh Jackman's performance in the Wolverine is one of his best performances as this character, that aside from aside from Logan, that I've ever seen. I will say this much, I think, before I move on further with the discussion of the film. Marvel Studios is going to be very hard pressed to find someone as good as Hugh Jackman to be their Wolverine. Now, am I saying it's impossible that there aren't actors out there who couldn't do it? Yeah, there are probably actors who could take up the mantle of Logan, of the Wolverine, and carry it off. But for a lot of us, myself included, it's going to be a tall order for any actor. I mean, okay, let's put it in another context. Let's say several decades down the road, they decide to recast the character of Anakin Skywalker, or maybe even Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker as a character has become such a cultural icon despite Rian Johnson's best efforts. Sorry, I'm just a little fatigue there. That most everyone who is familiar with the Star Wars universe knows that Mark Hamill is I would say in a lot of ways, the quintessential Luke Skywalker. Any actor who takes on that mantle is going to have a tall order to fill, but I'd say that depending on who they end up casting, because they are eventually, I imagine, going to cast another actor as a younger Luke Skywalker. The story is going to mandate it. The same is true here, although the conditions will be different. It's going to be a lot more difficult for them to cast an actor who has that same animal charisma, that same animal magnetism, and that same charisma that Hugh Jackman brought to the character. I mean, it was by sheer dumb happenstance that he got the part in the first place. I mean, Douglas Scott, another, I would say, definitely good actor, who unfortunately got injured and couldn't take on the role of Wolverine for the first X-Men film by Bryan Singer. And Hugh Jackman had this part drop in his lap. So, and I want to say hello to the chat, those that were here and those that are here now. Orange Hat Reviews, it's good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you popping by earlier. And Daniel Martin. Daniel, it is good to see you. Appreciate you popping in. It's the character of Wolverine is an icon amongst other icons of the comic book genre, whether it's DC, Marvel, or independent. And I'm not going to go out on any limbs at this time, at least, and give my thoughts on who would make a good Wolverine, because right now the roster would be almost limitless at this point. So, but I will say this. I hope whoever they end up casting can do as good of a job as Hugh Jackman did for his run as Wolverine, if he in fact has retired from the character. And all indications is that Jackman has said that Logan was his last performance, even though he does have some of his regrets and everything for not being able to be in the MCU. And, well, who knows? Maybe he'll decide to pick up the claws one more time for a certain cameo or something in a certain other Marvel X-Men franchise. Of course, I'm referring to the Deadpool franchise. So, and I will bring up your comment here, Daniel, very quickly. Let's see here. Do you think Sebastian Stan could pull off Luke Skywalker or no? Sebastian Stan is a good actor. Him as the Winter Soldier, he has a lot of complexity. He played that character extremely well. I know that Mark Hamill gave his blessing, quote unquote, for Sebastian Stan to take up the mantle of Luke Skywalker should Lucasfilm ever decide to bring him in, to tap him for that part. So, for the time being, yeah, I would say Sebastian Stan could pull it off, but we would have to wait and see what he does and what project he would be placed in. Yeah, Daniel, I'm the same way. I don't know at this point who would be a good Wolverine. Like I said, we just had Logan a few years ago, and we've had one Wolverine from 2000 to I think like 2018 or 2019, whenever Logan came out originally. So it's nearly 20 years of one actor playing this one character, whether it be in full length appearances or cameos. They got obviously Jackman to make a cameo appearance in X-Men First Class. He made another cameo appearance in X-Men Apocalypse. But for this film, James Mangold and the rest of the cast, and especially Hugh Jackman, wanted to take Logan on a different journey. And I would say this film, which is based on a story that Chris Claremont and Frank Miller both either collaborated on, this is a cool story. I mean, it starts with a flashback. I mean, I know I mentioned the whole part where Logan chases down the hunters that wound and everything, the grizzly bear, and then he takes them out. But then we have the introduction of Yukio. And this is, as James Mangold and Hugh Jackman described it, a fish out of water story. Because Logan gets thrust into a culture that he's not all familiar with, even though in the flashback that we see at the start of the film, Logan is a prisoner of war during World War II in Nagasaki, Japan. Now, for those of you who know your history, particularly World War II history, Nagasaki was the second site or the second city that the United States Army dropped a nuclear atomic bomb on. And we see Logan save the life of this one Japanese officer, Yoshida. I can't remember if they ever mention Yoshida's first name. Give me a minute. I'll take a look-see here real quick. Don't think they do. Yeah, I don't. No, they don't. Mm-mm. So we'll just refer to him as Yoshida-san. Seems only appropriate and respectful. But essentially, Logan saves the life of this Japanese officer who goes on to be a industrialist, but who always in the back of his mind keeps a memory of this unique individual who saved his life. And we meet this very enigmatic young Japanese woman, or anything by the name of Yukio. And I do want to apologize in advance to any of my audience who is Japanese. If I mispronounce any of these names, please know I do not do it deliberately. My Western tongue cannot always wrap itself around some of these more exotic names. But we have Yukio, played by Riel Fukushima. Actually, that was relatively easy. Who works for the Yoshida family. And of course, for those of you that are aware of the original adaptation of Logan's journey and adventures in Japan, the Yoshidas play a prominent part of particularly one character, and that is, of course, Mariko Yoshida. However, in this version, the character of Mariko Yoshida isn't a antagonist. She's a protagonist. She's actually caught up in events surrounding her grandfather's passing of his corporation to her rather than to her father. And I will say this. I was not familiar with any of these actors or actresses except for Hugh Jackman, Famke Jensen, of course, when Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen made their cameo appearance in the mid-credit scene at the end of the film. But this is a very, very talented cast of actors and actresses who played these parts and played them well. I mean, I have always considered myself I want to pronounce this correctly so as not to give anybody the wrong impression, but I've always been a fan of Asian culture, whether it's Japanese or Chinese, either way. And to see this particular culture portrayed accurately and not to any degree misrepresented was quite refreshing, honestly. And to the chat, just George is good to see you, man. Let me bring up your comment here, buddy. Hey, everyone. Had a crazy day at work at summer camp. Had the craziest game of toss the hacky sack ever. The Wolverine is underrated. The third act slips up from me, but very good film. I had no problems with the third act, George, but hey, that's me. And hope you're doing well, bud. Appreciate you popping into the chat. But let me bring up your comment here, Daniel, real quick. I really have a soft spot for the Wolverine, the Chris Claremont adaptation, the Wolverine in a different setting. I know people really had a problem with Silver Samurai. I didn't. I honestly didn't. I did not have a problem with how they portrayed the Silver Samurai because it was more fitting for the story. Obviously, a lot of people I think, might have been expecting the traditional adaptation or performance of the Silver Samurai in this film. But the fact that they kind of changed they changed the character around to where it has a closer tie to Logan than just some adversary that has a beef against Logan because he is, well, as they call him, a gaijin, which is anybody who isn't Japanese, essentially. Um, it's what they did with the Silver Samurai, turning it into a robot, or rather a suit of robotic armor, essentially a mecha, which is, I think, very fitting considering this is a film that does take place in Japan and has a very extensive Japanese cast. I mean, I'll give me just a minute because I do want to share the screen or everything, the cast screen and everything for this film, because this was a truly exceptional cast. I mean, I think a very underrated cast. Um, okay, let me make sure I've got this right. Let me pop back over here to StreamYard. There we go. Of course, you've got Hugh Jackman here. You got Riel Fukushima as Yukio. You got Tao Okamoto as Mariko Yoshida. You've got, okay, Hiriko Sanada as Shingun Yoshida. Now, this is one character I was really intrigued by because this was a character I was familiar with, and that is, of course, Lady Viper. And I am going to try my damnedest not to butcher this young woman's name. Svetlana. Oh, gosh, okay. Kochinikov. Phew. As Lady Viper, she was a standout. She was a real standout in this film. And of course, you had, as I mentioned, you had Famke Jensen reprising her role as Jean Grey. You had Patrick Stewart as Professor X at the end in the mid credit scene. That was a lead into arguably one of my all time favorite X-Men films, Days of Future Past. And this was just, from top to bottom, this was a solid cast for this film. I mean, of course, you got the man here. You got the big guy here. You got Hugh Jackman looking all dapper and everything with his glasses. Hey, it is true. Cool people do wear glasses. Anyway, but you have let me bring this back down real quick. You do have you have Yoshida wanting to relieve Logan of his burden, that of course being immortality, because he wants to be able to protect his family, or so he says, and continue to run his company in perpetuity, essentially. And it's a very intricate maze that Logan has to navigate because he is in a foreign culture. This is a culture that is about a lot about respect and honor and showing proper courtesy to those of different station. This is a culture that is, well, let's be honest, is foreign to Logan, except for his little bit of interaction during World War II. And of course, well, then back then, for those of you who are also students of history, you know that the Japanese were very brutal to their prisoners of war. And yet Logan was able to survive. And it's the setting of this movie. They shot extensively, although not exclusively, in Japan. Now, the Yoshida compound itself was on a soundstage, although it was a very expansive soundstage. The village that leads to Yoshida's main factory complex, that was actually built from the ground up, because they started on a soundstage, but they realized that they needed a much bigger space, and so they decided to build the village that leads to Yoshida's main factory outdoors. But as I was doing the research, watching the making of for this film, it very much impressed me just how rigorously they stuck to tradition about how Japanese society is structured and just how ornate and and intricate their buildings, how their structures and how their architecture is put together. So, um, it's a beautiful film just in the way that James Mangold had it shot. And the fact that you had a writer in Mangold, not only did you have a writer, but you had a director who knew how to add his own take into this film, but do so in a way that wasn't disrespectful to the story that Claremont and Miller had originally written, was very impressive. So, and I want to say hello also to the chat, another regular here, Ferris. So Ferris, excuse me, Geeks World. Ferris, it's good to see you, bud. What's up, everybody? After The Last Stand and Origins destroyed the franchise continuity, I'm glad when this movie came out. It's very much a standalone story that heavily centers on Logan's life after Xmen. Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree with you, Ferris. This and First Class really did a lot to revitalize the X-Men franchise. It was it was a lot of ways it was a palate cleanser. And though it does have a few connections to X-Men Last Stand, it you could almost make the argument that it doesn't lean too heavily on that particular film. I mean, you could make any number of arguments as for why Logan killed Jean and everything without necessarily it connecting to Last Stand. But the fact that they do at least use that one element of the story, that one small glimmer of a decent story in that movie to connect and kind of flesh out this story, which is very much a redemption story for Logan and kind of a journey for him to rediscover who he is and what he potentially can become. It was very well put together. It was, the flashbacks between Logan or the dream sequences between him and Jean Grey, they were very well put together. Famke Jensen, she also interviewed for this film, and one of the comments that she made was the fact that these scenes were a lot more intimate than anything we had seen previously between these two characters. Because for a lot of us, though we know the comic book continuity for the story between Logan and Jean Grey, she obviously ends up with Mr. Straight-Laced, Mr. Cyclops, Scott Summers, which I'm not bashing on Scott Summers. He is a good actor. He is a good character. He is not without his flaws, obviously, but he is a good character. And I think also for those of us that were fans of the X-Men comics in the 90s, when they finally had that issue where Jean and Scott finally got married, that issue flew off the shelves. I should know. I used to have a copy, and I kicked myself to this very day when I gave away my comic book collection. The mistakes we make when we're young and stupid. But anyway, that one tie from Last Stand to kind of anchor this film and be a motivator for Logan to try and find his way back from being the recluse that he had become after making the decision to kill Jean. And honestly, it was extremely well done. I mean, I myself, I haven't reviewed too many of his movies. This is actually, I think, the first one I have ever reviewed of James Mangold's work. But of the handful of films that he has done, this one, obviously, he did Logan, which, like I said, we'll be reviewing here in a few weeks. And of course, Walk the Line, one of my all-time favorite um, biopics about one of my all-time favorite musicians, and of course, that being Johnny Cash. I found it just a little bit interesting that for the majority of this film, and I have to look at let's see, Wolverine came out in 2013. When did Walk the Line come out? Walk, uh, okay, Walk the Line came out in, if it's the right movie, and I think it is. Yep, 2005. So it's not lost on me per se that Logan, for the majority of this film, was dressed all in black. So to you, Mr. James Mangold, I say to you, nice little nod to your previous work. Although I will say this too. The costuming for this film was kept relatively realistic and downplayed. But the one thing that the costumer or costume designer Isis Musindan said that Logan is more earth tones. He's more browns, grays, and obviously blacks. And I thought that was very appropriate. But I think also having the leading man in two of his more popular films, that being of course Walk the Line and the Wolverine, and Logan is dressed all in black. Like I said, nice little Easter egg to one of James Mangold's other films. And I will say this too. Considering this is, in all honesty, a comic book film, James Mangold did a very good job. James Mangold, honestly, I think is one of the best directors we have around today, and I really hope this might be a small hope, but I don't think it's an unreasonable one. I hope that maybe somewhere down the road, Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, and Feige we trust. Well, and God I trust, but when it comes to Marvel and Feige, I trust. I hope that maybe James Mangold will return to the MCU and do another project for them, maybe something a little more heavier, but at the same time, maybe something that's a little more lighthearted too. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But in terms of the Wolverine, Mangold had a very particular vision for this, as did the writers and directors and second unit directors. They did a good job putting this film together. And well, hey, everybody, give a very warm welcome to a regular here on the Ambassador Wing. You know him, you love him, Ferris of Ferris Geeks World. Ferris, good evening, bud.
Hey, Ambassador, how are you doing?
Can't complain. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, all good. I mean, I'm basically doing, family stuff, but I still have the time to see your stream by now, and probably still have the time to join you. I'm probably not gonna be here like really long until the end, so
Oh, that's
it's
fine.
probably a good time to, yeah, it's probably a good time to just to discuss, about the Wolverine, which
Yes.
I gotta be say, I enjoyed.
Well, your thoughts, bud.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, after Last Stand, disappoint me and destroyed, like the backstory and everything, and Wolverine also tries its best to, give a proper origin story, and yet it still blows. I never thought that, we would never get to see another proper solo movie, and and until like when the announcement there's going to be another Wolverine movie with another director and it's going to be solo centered, set in Japan. I could never be more excited to think like, oh God, finally we're getting another Wolverine movie, and we are gonna set this in Japan. Like, oh man, like it's gonna be really fun. So
Mhm.
when I saw the movie, believe it or not, I think like I enjoy like probably the first and second act, but I think the first and second act really sets up like the backstory of how
Mhm.
Wolverine's life is like during the war. Yeah, I don't want to say this is like too much like origins, like first sets up in the war and then goes into the present day, but I think this
Mhm.
pretty much does it better, like on how like Logan's life, like came from being a a military guy, being trapped in a war, and then finally
Mhm.
going into the present day. I think this really, I think like this movie really knows how to like rediscover like the backstory of Wolverine. This movie is kind of like is very heavily centered on the rediscovery of Wolverine's backstory, because we all know like when Wolverine got his adamantium, he lost his memory, and then trying to like regain it back, with the help of Xavier. But of course, this movie takes place like after the Last Stand, and when Xavier is gone, he has to go
Mhm.
that journey on his own. But now, like he finally, rediscovers that part of his life and how he finally went through all those years. And I thought the whole, having Jean Grey was kind of like forced, but I'll admit, but seeing Famke Johnson as Jean Grey again, I love it. I mean, I love her portrayal, even though Last Stand kind of destroyed that. But when seeing her again is like trying to like develop like Wolverine's character on how he finally becomes the character that we all know. So that's basically for me on the first and the second act. But since we haven't got to the third act yet, but I think like the setting up of Wolverine's life of rediscovering and finally like uh, getting to socializing again, since he's becoming a reckless, looking like a like what Mariko said, a caveman.
Mhm.
So like yeah, so finally when we see him like like socializing and getting to another world that he barely remembers, it's just fun to watch. This is like like a very fun adventure movie. I really see this as a fun adventure movie. But yeah, the character, Hugh Jackman as always really gives really good portrayal. So that's to me.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing for me, Ferris, was the fact that Jackman did a lot more extensive fight choreography training or fight training for this film. And the thing was the fight coordinator and the stunt coordinators both made the comment, or one of them made the comment, that when it comes to the choreography part of the different fights that Logan or the Jackman goes through, he picks up the choreography very, very quickly. And I have to think to myself, well, you have a guy who is a trained stage performer, who's done musicals and so on. So choreography would come to him relatively easily. I mean, but however, in this particular context, it's choreography in terms of fight, not so much dance moves. But depending on who's training him, I can't remember exactly the name of the stunt choreographer and everything, and the fight choreographer. It doesn't surprise me that he would pick up on those things so quickly. But in terms of Logan's journey throughout this film, it is him learning to be able to socialize with people again, rather than being so standoffish, such a loner as he is. And it's rather intriguing to me that he's learning to socialize in a culture that would naturally be very standoffish to him. However, you've got the two female leads in this film. You've got Yukio and Mariko Yoshida, who, although Mariko takes a little bit of time to warm up to him, whereas Yukio is a little more open to him. She's a little more receptive to him and everything, because she is like him. Granted, her mutant abilities are not as extensive, obviously, and aren't as flashy as his per se, but they can understand one another on the level that they're both mutants. They're both outsiders. And she is very much an outsider because essentially old man Yoshida found her scrounging around in dumpsters trying to find food, brings her home, and essentially makes her a companion um, for Mariko. And the thing I found interesting throughout this film was the fact that Logan at first is very hesitant to develop any type of connection to Mariko. But as time passes on, they do develop a connection because they also she realizes as well, just as much as him, that she is an outsider, even in her own family. Her father resents her. He wants nothing to do with her, and while she has a seemingly very loving relationship with her grandfather is using her just as much as anybody is. She's engaged to this absolute slime ball and Harada, who is a shining star and everything in the Japanese government as the head of security or law enforcement or whatever the case may be, and she's seeking something more as well, just as much as Logan is. So, just as much as this is Logan's story, and it is obviously his story too, the characters that he connects with, that being, of course, Yukio and Mariko, they help him reconnect to his humanity in a way that I don't think he expected. And I do want to say hello to the chat. Jacob Ironside, it's good to see you, bud. Appreciate you popping by. And hope you're having a good week, my man. So, um, let me ask you, Ferris, what did you think of the readaptation or the different or how they changed the character of Mariko Yoshida from what we know in the comics of her as her obviously becoming the character of Lady Deathstrike to being a character that's a little more that isn't at all adversarial towards Logan, but rather is more sympathetic to what he's going through.
Honestly, to me, I think like the changes of Marco from the comics to the movies, I think they did it okay. I mean, just to give a lot of development to Logan, and because that in the comics, like both Mariko and Wolverine were, of course, lovers, like
Mm-hmm.
before joining the X-Men, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But then like going into the movies here is just pretty much like a different kind of different kind of situation where he like um everything that old man Yashida has been going through with Logan during like the what's that called, the bomb, or the bomb in
Yeah,
Hiroshima,
the bomb.
Nagasaki.
No,
Yeah,
it was the bomb. It was the second atomic bomb the U.S. dropped on Nagasaki. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, it like everything they've been through, like they trying to like build that connection together, where like at least where maybe being an outsider, like being an outsider isn't that bad. Being different isn't that bad, because I mean Logan is a mutant, well Mariko is just a normal more normal woman with a problem, like connecting with people in her family. But
Mhm.
but then like when you get these two together, they have that kind of uh, connection. And I think like to me it's just okay. I mean, I thought they could have done that maybe if they have like maybe a little maybe a little more time together, trying to like connect with each other. But I thought like for a runtime of how long was the runtime of this? 2 hours, 15 minutes, or
Yeah,
30
it was just a
minutes?
shade over 2 hours. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I thought for a 2 hour adventure movie, I thought they did pretty okay. To build that relationship, and
Mhm.
finally like they finally understand each other. So at
Yeah.
least yeah, the changes for an adaptation is fine. Like if they adapt this movie like similar to the comics, where like they have a backstory, they have that kind of backstory together, and they go like into the present. I think it would have, it would have been just. I don't think it. I think it would have been different for the character. It's just trying to rediscover everything. I need, and this movie is just focusing on Wolverine's rediscovering his other life, like back then. I mean, it's not like his whole entire life. I mean, it's just his life with during the war and this connection to Old Man Yashida, and then finally to like yeah, and finally to like connect each other again. That's how it goes.
Well, and the thing that I found really interesting about this was the fact that Logan does consider, at least momentarily, very briefly, Yoshida's offer of giving up his immortality. But then he realizes he can't do this because this is so much of part of who and what he is as a person. And there's a couple of dream sequences with Jean, between him and Jean Grey, and the one in particular when he's talking to Jean, she's like, it's not such a difficult thing to just die. I mean, she just says to him, I can see it in your face, a person who wants to die but doesn't know how to. And I find it very interesting because Logan is a character that is unique even amongst his own kind, and those, of course, mutants. Because now, even without the adamantium skeleton, but especially with the adamantium skeleton, Logan is essentially an immortal. Now, there is only a handful of films that have ever really dealt with the concept of a character who is, in fact, immortal. And I can name them on one hand. Of course, the movie Highlander, the first one with Sean Connery and Christopher Lambert, which is an absolute standout of 80s cinema. But also and take them for what they are, particularly the first film. The Vampire Diaries, and even Queen of the Damned with the character of Lestat. You're dealing with a character who is immortal, and it's for us a dream that we sometimes have, but at the same time, immortality is also a curse because everything that you love that is around you, everything that you care about, eventually will succumb to time. And we do see this play out, and we will discuss it a little more in depth when we do get to Logan. The fact that we see Logan in a far distant future in a world that's very much different from what he had seen and what he had experienced when he was younger. And but in this particular film, Logan decides that he's not ready to give up his immortality. In fact, that he realizes it's not a sin or a crime to be immortal. And he does come to terms with the fact that he did have to kill the love of his life. He did have to kill Jean Grey. And he finally made peace with it. And when he says goodbye to her, there's a peace about it. He's no longer tormented by it. And, Yukio says early on in the film, a man who has nightmares every night is a man in pain. Logan's dreams, even though they are seemingly pleasant of Jean, they are always nightmares. He keeps reliving that moment where he stabs her and kills her. We see it. I think we see the blood stained, or we see the blood soaked part of Jean Grey's nightgown. And we see his claws plunged into her abdomen. And he freaks out. And it's a hard thing for someone to live with, killing the one person that you love most in life. But even if you don't kill them, to outlive the love of your life is not an easy thing. I mean, I think for you and I, considering how much family means to us and the people around us, it's a hard thing to come to terms with, outliving those that we love. And for Logan, doubly so, because he's had to bury so many people that he loved or cared for. So, Ferris, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of think like the whole the again, I know you and I know that we don't like The Last Stand, and I'm not really a fan of the way how Brian Singer's setting up setting up Logan and Jean Grey. But again, if he's the one that if he's the one that kills her in The Last Stand, and soon like he's been haunted by the past of his life. Yeah, I guess I guess this would try to make much more emotional connection, and the theme of the Wolverine is pretty much like again, like I said, and I've mentioned this word many times, it's a rediscovery and trying to move on from the past. And that's why, like, by the end, when he has to kill old man Yoshida, who is on that silver samurai robotic suit, and
Mhm.
he has to dream again, and yeah, and has to dream again, goes into a dream again, I mean, and seeing Jean Grey, he's not even ready to go into the afterlife, but he at least has to choose to be that same person. He has to be that same guy, the same soldier that he fought in the wars, and he fought with with the X-Men. And of course that sets up Days of Future Past, and of course and it would
Mhm.
eventually foreshadowing Logan, which is which is a very much character study of Logan's life, and how he has to be vulnerable, and how he has to finally has to leave leave the world and go into the afterlife. Of course, that's exactly how I think. But again, I'm as much as I dislike the having Logan and Jean having a relationship, even though they did in the comics. But okay, I thought the way they did it in this movie is fine. I mean, it's again, it's the theme of rediscovery and moving on, from the mistakes that you made, and of course that the all the pain that you suffered through all those years. And I think that's what the Wolverine is trying to demonstrate.
Well, and that was for James Mangold and the rest of and for Hugh Jackman both, they very much, Jackman's history with the character of Logan the Wolverine is rather lengthy. We all know it for those of us that are familiar with the film franchise. And he's like, the Jackman said this in one of the interviews they had on the making of for the film. He's like, I have been so drawn to this character because I'm so invested in it, because it gives me an opportunity to see where they're going to take this character next. I think if James Mangold didn't have the reputation that he did for the movies that he had done at the time, particularly Walk the Line, we're dealing with a very flawed and broken individual in the person of the real life person of Johnny Cash. And the way that that film was received and got a lot of acclaim, and justifiably so, I don't think Jackman would have even remotely considered working with Mangold on this film, because as I mentioned before, this was Mangold's first foray into comic book movies, though it would not be his last. And obviously, he did he did Logan, which was I think honestly a perfect bookend for Jackman's entire run as Wolverine. And you know, Logan, he carries a lot of regret, and the young woman Yukio, who's friends with Mariko Yoshida, she sees this. She's very intuitive. She's very introspective, and that was something I think was needed for this story. You needed a character that wasn't afraid to say to Logan what he had to hear. Not so much what he needed to hear, but what he had to hear, even though he didn't want to hear it. And, you know, you've obviously got this entire intrigue of old man Yoshida seemingly faking his death and he's they've built the suit and everything, the Silver Samurai suit, that mecha, which I thought honestly the design for it was very cool. I mean, I'm a love of mecha, everything in terms of Japanese anime and so on, and Japanese cinema, but also in terms of how the design was respectful to the design of the Silver Samurai armor from the comic books, and how they adapted that very iconic character for this film. I mean, you've only got two or three notable villains in this film. Of one, of course, being Old Man Yoshida and everything in the Silver Samurai costume, but also Lady Viper, played by the by. I'm not going to try and pronounce her name again, but the actress who portrayed Lady Viper, or just Viper, she was absolutely. I mean, she was stunning in terms of her appearance, but in terms of her performance, she was equally as stunning, and she was very much every inch of that character brought to life on in live action. So, um, your thoughts on that, Ferris?
Honestly, I was kind of disappointed what they did with the Silver Samurai. I mean, originally it was supposed to be Mariko's brother in the comics, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, they
Yes.
just turned like,
Mhm.
yeah, they turned the brother into the boyfriend, which is like literally weird. And then like going to the end is like, okay, like so now they have like Old Man Yashida in the Silver Samurai suit. That moment to me was like, what? What? Like I thought he's dead or something, but I thought it would be like really cool if they actually like like kidnap Old Man Yashida, and then somehow the man who kidnapped was actually Silver Samurai. But then after that, it turns out like it wasn't. It wasn't like what I thought. So I thought Yashida died. I mean, Old Man Yashida died for real. But then when I going to the end, it was like a shocking plot twist. So the motivation of Old Man Yashida was to take Logan's healing ability just to just to have his power. I mean, I don't see how much I don't see like how much jealousy that like Old Man Yashida made like during the beginning of the movie. Like, I mean, he is shocked to see how Logan is healed of his of how he got through like I don't know a third-degree burn through his entire body, and somehow like like Old Man Yashida really is really shocked, but we don't see that jealousy that he had like he wanted power, like the same thing that Logan has. Like I don't there's no like I don't see any like motivation on why he has he built his own empire, his own company. But
Mhm.
getting through the but getting through the climax, if we see Logan fighting off the Silver Samurai mecha, I thought it was a cool choreographed fight. And again, I thought the
Mhm.
fighting was really good. It's a lot of improvement. I mean, as much as Last Stand has its good moments, like Wolverine's fighting, of course, is a little better. I mean,
Mhm.
of course, like his fighting throughout the franchise is becoming a lot more improving throughout the years. And the
Mhm.
Wolverine, of course, is a really good has really good choreographed fights. But going through the story of how they showed Old Man Yashida becoming Silver Samurai, and how he faked this whole the whole media thinking that he's dead. It's just like I don't know, it seems like pretty unnecessary. I mean, I kind of like having that deja vu of like when Silver Fox thought, when Silver Fox died, but then at the end, like she didn't die, but then after all, she's died. She died. But it goes like the same thing with Old Man Yashida. Like, like again, it's like a what moment? Like what? Like he's not dead. He's not dead. And yeah. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, for the structure of the film, it didn't bother me because here's the thing: this, as I mentioned, and as I mentioned in the making of for this film, this very much is a fish out of water story, and it's almost like also like a Alice in Wonderland esque type of story as well that has a lot of twists and turns. And the reveal that Yoshida has become obsessed with Logan, become obsessed with his power, but also he doesn't trust his son, and he doesn't trust his own granddaughter to run the corporation after he's supposedly gone. So instead, he decides to forestall um, death, or arrest death entirely, and is allowed to and be immortal essentially. It makes sense. A lot of industrialists and everything, you see other depictions of industrialists in other films who become mad with power. And I think Yoshida became so mad with power because of his fascination with Logan, that he coveted what Logan had because he didn't see it as a curse per se, he saw it as a gift. And I think the parallel of a man who wants power but for all the wrong reasons, and a man that has power but doesn't necessarily want it. And when I say power in this particular context, I mean in terms of a ability that makes one person rather singular and another person that wants it and will stop at nothing to get it, is a very interesting parallel, because Logan was born this way. Now, granted, he wasn't born with the adamantium skeleton. That was done by Department H and everything. And that story we already know. But for Logan, not him being able to heal from anything, to him it's almost second nature. It's something he has come to live with, and something that it's a burden that he carries. And by the end of this film, he no longer sees it as a curse because of the journey he has gone on. And he realizes that he can still do good in this world with the gifts that he has given. And even the antagonists in this film are a mirror for Logan. Now, I will say this: the scene after Yoshida's goons get their hands on Mariko, and Yukio and Logan go to the hotel where Harada, Yukio's fiance, is staying, and he's caught practically bare ass with a couple of girls getting drunk and dancing. While I did see the humor in that scene, I think that scene was played up for humor. It
I love that
also,
scene.
I do too. He's like, Yukio asks, "Did you know there's a pool down here?" He's like, "No, I wasn't aware." And he's just walking away. And I mean, this movie does have humor in it, but it's not oversaturated with it. And I think that was a good call on the part of um, James Mangold and the writers for this film. Because when you're dealing with a character like Logan, his humor is very dry, but the way that Jackman delivers it is just spot on. I mean, if you go back to one of the funniest lines from any of the X-Men films, and from honestly the very first X-Men film, and it's right after Logan has taken out Mystique, and Cyclops and Jean and Storm are just saying there. He comes to the door and he's like, "Wait a minute, how do we know it's you? You're a dick."
Yeah, I
Great
love
line.
that part too. I love that line too. But I have a fun fact though. That line was actually written none other than Joss Whedon.
Oh Lord. Oh well. This is one instance where we'll have to separate the art from the artist. So, I'll bring up your comment here, Daniel.
Well,
The
he's
premise of
uncredited.
Thank heavens for that. The premise of Logan, tired of living and losing his healing factor, is really interesting aspect to explore. It is. I mean, And the way that it's done, you have Viper essentially inject, quote unquote, everything with that with that mechanical device, that little nano droid that attaches itself to his heart and is somehow able to arrest or to hinder his healing factor, was a cool play. I mean, because Logan, for the longest time, has considered himself pretty much indestructible. And to all intents and purposes, he is. But what we have here with the Wolverine is a situation where Logan doesn't have his healing factor to rely on, that he has to rely on others. And when Yukio takes him to that veterinary hospital and
I thought that was
as a,
funny too. Like they
he's like,
take a literal animal into a veterinarian hospital. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I mean Logan is kind of like a living animal.
in a lot of ways, yeah, he's very animalistic, he's very instinctual. I mean, it's been part of his character forever, literally forever. From the first time we met him, if you read the comics back in the 60s, when he's first introduced in Giant Size X-Men, when they send Xavier recruits an entirely new team to go save the original team. And but from that point on, we see Logan as a berserker, as a character who's very much driven by instinct and by emotion and by more aggressive emotion, especially. But as time has gone on, his character has evolved and changed, and that's what makes him so interesting. And that's why Jackman was willing to come back for this movie, because he wanted to see how far he could take the character of Logan and what the writers and the director were able to do with the character. And you see, if you ever have if you have a copy of the Wolverine, you have the opportunity to watch the making of, you see Jackman's enthusiasm to return to this role. And Mangold made a very interesting comment that by the end of this film, they righted a lot of the mistakes that were done in the previous films and brought Logan back to a place where he should have been in the first place. And not only that, but also resolved a major plot point in his character's journey, and that is, of course, the death of Jean Grey. And, you know, I said my piece about X-Men Last Stand and Dark Phoenix in that video I made a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, looking at Wolverine in Last Stand and looking at him here in this film, Logan was better in this film. He had better direction. He had a better script. The story made a lot more sense. Am I saying that there aren't potentially issues in the film? No, there's going to be issues with any film, but there's a lot more good in this film, in the Wolverine, than there is on the counter, where that there is a lot of bad, and there isn't a lot of bad in this film. I mean, you can make the argument that the third act is a bit wonky and everything. Myself, I never had a problem with the third act. To me, it was a satisfying payoff for the film. And I would have liked to have seen, maybe a flashback somewhere, maybe in Logan in particular, where he does go back to see Mariko in Japan. Because the next time we see anything, um, when we get to the mid credit scene in the film, it's been 2 years since he left Japan, and you have to wonder, did he ever go back to see her again? But we have that. It's. I'm not gonna say that the mid credit scene in this film is iconic, but it is a major cliffhanger, because it also resurrects two characters. Well, resurrects one character and rectifies another. And we have two of the best sirs in acting today, Sir Ian McKellen and Sir Patrick Stewart, reprise their roles as Professor Xavier and Eric Lyncher, aka Magneto. And Logan's looking at Xavier. He's like, "How?" And Xavier says, "As I told you once before, you're not the only one with gifts." Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, Ferris. There's actually a post-credits scene in X-Men Last Stand where the character of Moira McTaggart is watching over that individual that has no cognitive brain function, is essentially just a blank slate. And you hear Xavier's voice say, Moira, which I'm glad that they did have they did have that scene, because it did leave the way back for Xavier to appear in this film, and obviously for his character to return in general.
That makes the Last Stand pointless, to be honest. And again, like you see, like by the end of the movie, like you see, like Eric, Eric is still can move a chess piece, and somehow, like, like Xavier somehow is alive, and I don't know how he get into his body. And some theories say that that is his twin or something. So I guess it makes Last Stand really bad and entirely pointless.
It does, and I think that was the idea. I do. Well, here's the thing, and to go into a little bit of Last Stand. The argument that they made was that the fact that Magneto was such a high level mutant, he's considered in terms of grade or ranking, he's an Omega level. His powers are so immense that obviously that the mutant cure didn't, it worked on him temporarily, but it didn't completely erase his abilities altogether. If I remember correctly, what Moira McTaggart said in the film about the individual was that it was a man that was born with no conscience. He was born with no brain functions, no nothing. And Xavier was able to transfer his conscience, his entire thoughts, his entire mind from his body into that other body, essentially. So let me bring up your comment here, Daniel, real quick. Yukio was a really great character. I wouldn't mind seeing more of her going forward, but I understand she was contained to this movie. Yeah, she was a cool character, and she was played very well by Riel Fukushima. I'll bring up your other comment here, Daniel. Yeah, the post-credit scene / setup for Days of Future Past kind of made no sense. I get what you're saying, Daniel, but I respectfully disagree, because I think it did make perfect sense. Well, okay, I won't say perfect sense, but it did make sense. But that's just me. I mean, for those of you who know, and I will, like I said, yeah, Daniel, you're not wrong. But again, the Fox X-Men franchise was never accused of having great continuity. Yeah, Daniel, you're not wrong there. But I will say this: when they get it right, when they got it right, they got it right. And now that Marvel has full control of all of its properties again, I say, until he proves to me otherwise, and Kevin Feige, when it comes to Marvel and Kevin Feige, I trust. So
That's what the problem they have. Sorry, that's what the problem they have with the Fox X-Men franchise. They never have like a proper they never had the people behind it, like the producers. They don't even understand like how the continuity work. And the moment that destroyed the continuity in The Last Stand is where that scene with the young Jean Grey, where she, you know, experientially, like I don't know, experientially or inexperiencely, lift every car in the neighborhood. And I go back and see like the second X-Men movie, which is X-Men United, where Jean is losing control of her telepathy, and Cyclops just say, Jean, it's not just your telepathy. One thing you have to concentrate just to levitate a book or something. Like when I go back and watch those two, between those two scenes in Last Stand and X2, and there's this moment in X2, and by the end, like like Professor Xavier said, even when Jean was a student, she was hesitant of her powers. So at that moment when I rewatched The Last Stand, I was like, okay, what the hell is going on in here? What is wrong with all these people behind the scenes? Like, do
Well,
they learn their lesson or something? Yeah. What do you
well,
think?
I discussed this. Um, I discussed this when I did my video on Last Stand and on Dark Phoenix. Two things, they both times they screwed up Jean Grey's origin, and they also screwed up obviously one of the greatest storylines of all time with the X-Men universe, and not to mention the the broader Marvel universe, and that was of course the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix saga. And I don't want to get off on a big tangent here in regards to that, but in the context of this film, what they did with Jean Grey is they kept her isolated to just being a dream sequence. And for that, it worked. And it was the right motivation for Logan for this story. But, you know, as we'll see when the timeline is righted in the aftermath of what happened in Days of Future Past, everybody's alive, even Jean. And, you know, Brian, again, separating the art from the artist and the allegations that were made towards Singer. Singer said something, and I have stood by it to this day. If you disliked what Fox did with the X-Men franchise after I left, consider Days of Future Past a reset. But here's the thing. If we had not had First Class and we had not had the Wolverine, we probably would have never gotten Days of Future Past, because both films were, they were profitable. They were well received by critics and by, hey, us, the fans. And call it ham-fisted, call it maybe poorly executed, sure. But that mid-credit scene for the Wolverine that led into Days of Future Past, I think, was a good attempt to connect the two films and start to rectify the mess that was The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat, MJ1 Media. It's good to see you, buddy, and glad you enjoyed it. And CJH, I'm not going to say it's the greatest. I'm going to put a very strong argument out there here in a couple weeks or anything or so for Days of Future Past being the greatest X-Men film ever. So, let's see. Daniel Martin. Didn't Matthew Vaughn collaborate with Singer on Days of Future Past? I thought he had some hand in it. Daniel, I have to do some digging on that one, but I'm not entirely
He did
sure.
actually. He did. He had some. I think he had some story credit in it. I mean, he was originally going to direct Days of Future Past, but he still, he still have contribution to the story, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, his name was in it.
And and if that's the case, cool, because Matthew Vaughn did a really good job with First Class. I mean, and go back and rewatch the stream I did and everything a few weeks ago. So, and yeah, MJ1, I have to agree. I wish the lead scene in the Wolverine where Yukio gave Logan the yellow mask should have been in the final cut. Well, it wasn't just the mask; it was also the gloves. I think it was an entire uniform and everything essentially that was in that box that Mariko gave to Yukio to give to him. So, but yeah, it's you know this film in a lot of ways could have failed badly and could have been just another nail in the coffin that was the X-Men franchise. But you had a good cast, you had a damn good crew, and you had a good director in the person of James Mangold, who, granted, as I mentioned a few times already, had no real experience with comic book movies at all, but was very familiar with strong character based storytelling. And that's what both Wolverine, Logan, and Walk the Line all have. It's strong character based storytelling. Now you have to give the character a good story to participate in, and I think considering they adapted the story that Chris Claremont and Frank Miller themselves collaborated on, you really couldn't go wrong. Unless they just absolutely bungled it, and in this film they did not bungle it. They nailed it. I mean, I don't know what the final box office was for this. I can take a look. Let's see.
But I gotta be honest though, I will never understand why they have to cut that suit out, and I'm assuming that Hugh Jackman never wore the suit, like ever. Even even like Days of Future Past, I thought he's gonna be wearing that full on suit because
Mhm.
actually he never did. I mean, I always wanted to see like what he looked like in the suit, but again, I mean, you said it looks too goofy and all that, but I mean, even if you look at like the Avengers, and and its characters, Marvel Studios done it right. I mean, if Marvel Studios done it right, like why couldn't Fox do the same thing with the X-Men? And we got a glimpse of that in X-Men Apocalypse. But again, I mean, for X-Men Apocalypse, it was cool to see like the new five X-Men wear their color coded uniforms. But for Wolverine, like I'll never understand like why couldn't they do that? I don't know if maybe Hugh Jackman didn't want to wear it. Is he intend to wear that suit? Does he have any desire? Like I'm confused on that part.
Honestly, it never bothered me that he never wore that suit and everything. It's for me, well, the suit itself is iconic. The design of it is iconic. The character is more iconic than the suit that he wears. So, let's see. MJ1. Let me get your comment up here. Definitely a huge step up from X Men Origins Wolverine. Yeah, way up. Yeah, and guys, I am still. We may do this or anything at the end of this review series. I am considering very strongly doing a riff stream on X Men Origins Wolverine. I think just to kind of, um,
It'll be painful to go through all the all the flaws and the bad things they all did.
yeah, but it'll be kind of fun too. So, uh, needs to give us his character in the spandex as soon as part of him is why he's iconic. Eh, I can see your argument, MJ. I can. But for me, the character is more iconic than the suit that he wears. So, let's see.
You know, the one thing that I kind of like, wondering like in Logan, like, are we did like I always wonder like if there's gonna be like a flashback, like to Wolverine's past, or maybe like him like wearing the suit because I've always liked the idea of him like wearing the iconic yellow black suit, or along with the other actors like James Marsden, Famke Johnson, or Halle Berry, Kelsey Grammer wearing their color coded uniforms and all that. I mean, I always
Mhm.
fond of that idea, and I always
Yeah.
want to see that kind of art, somewhere on the internet or social media. But then like it's a huge missed opportunity for like Fox to not like give color coded uniforms. But I guess like black is realistic, like what you said. But
Mhm.
again, I like after the success of the Avengers, I always wanted to see like the X Men in their color coded uniforms. But that's just me. I'm kind of a big fan of it. I'm advocating
Well,
for it.
I'm not gonna say that I'm not. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a decent adaptation. Doesn't necessarily have to be yellow spandex, but maybe a faithful adaptation at least of the design, not so much what the suits themselves are made out of. And I mean, Daniel Martin, you had a good idea here, and I think that is a good idea. I did too, Ferris. I thought he would at least try on the uniform and say, "Nah, it doesn't fit right, bub." So, I did want to bring this up. I did look up the worldwide box office for the Wolverine. It made four million 414 million point 8. I'm trying to figure out how to read this right.
But it did surpass like X Men Origins Wolverine, right?
Uh, yeah. Of course, that's not hard. It is not hard at all. Um, 4,414 $414.8 million. There, got it out finally. So, released on July 26, 2013. Wow, it's not even that old. So, it'll be 10
Well, it's
years old
almost
next
10
year.
years. Yeah, it's
Oh,
almost
no.
10 years old next year.
Yeah. So, um, let's see. X-Men Origins Wolverine. Let's see how much that did. Man. Oh, there it is. X-Men Origins Wolverine. Oh, this should be interesting. Uh,
If I'm not mistaken, I think X-Men Origins Wolverine did leaked online, like the movie. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I did watch the leaked version, and it was like unfinished and everything. But I
mhm.
watched like the final cut of the film, the theatrical film. My God, those VFX are still terrible.
Um, X-Men Origins Wolverine made 373.1 million. So the Wolverine did do better by at least a couple of million. So,
But Logan is still like the highest grossing Wolverine movie, isn't it?
well, give me a minute. I'll tell you. Logan.
I'm assuming
Like
it is.
Logan came out in 2017. My bad. Box office. Uh, yeah, Logan made 619.2 million. So yeah, it did pretty damn good. X-Men Apocalypse made five 543.9 million, so almost $545 million. And I still love it. I do. So,
Logan is still the better film, like in terms of the theme
oh
and
yeah.
everything, because like Wolverine is very much a adventure centric rediscovery and moving on, but Logan is more like more Logan is more a character study and more like the finale of Wolverine's entire life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
But you will do a stream about that, right?
Oh yeah. The next one I'm going to do is going to be Days of Future Past. I'm going in as clear of a chronological order in terms of in universe and also release as I can for this franchise. It's not necessarily easy considering all the reboots and everything, but thus far, yeah, and everything. Logan will be the last one I probably do. I might do I might do a duo review on Deadpool because I did enjoy the first Deadpool. I've never seen the second one, but I do have it on Blu-ray. And like I said, we might do a riff stream on everything that's wrong with X-Men Origins Wolverine because that would just be fun to tear into. So, um, I'll bring up your comment here, Daniel. The green screen cut Ferris. LOL. Someone at work downloaded and watched the whole thing without the VFX. Oh man. And here's a familiar face, Marcus Cruz. I hope they do have a Wolverine movie in the MCU. We'll have to wait and see, Marcus.
That's gonna be
What?
wait. We have to wait like about 10 or 15 years because we have to like rest up the X-Men franchise first before having a new X-Men into the
Mhm.
main MCU, of course.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to introduce the X-Men themselves. As I said in my review of Dark Phoenix and The Last Stand, hope I hope to hell we finally get a decent adaptation of the Dark Phoenix saga. I do, and the Phoenix saga itself, just in totality. Don't just jump ahead to the Dark Phoenix. Give us the Phoenix too.
Well, they originally attempted to do that with the third movie. I mean, it was supposed to be, like probably a loose adaptation of the Phoenix Saga. I mean, it wasn't necessarily Dark Phoenix. I mean, just probably a loose adaptation of the Phoenix Saga. Like it is supposed to be like focusing on the resurrection of Jean Grey, because like in the comics, like the X-Men went to space and then they thought Jean died, but then she
Hmm.
became the Phoenix. So basically,
Hmm.
it's probably like the same person but with an entity inside. I mean, that's basically what the premise and the idea was supposed to be
Hmm.
for the third one. But again, like after Fox rushed everything trying to get it done, and yeah, simply they just ruin it.
Yeah, they screwed the pooch, and I enumerate how many different reasons and ways why they screwed the pooch on both those films. And I swear, if I
I'm wait,
ever see the name, go ahead, Ferris.
I'm, yeah, I was kind of like waiting for like justice they need to do for James Marsden's Cyclops. I mean, I did tell you like in the Marvel before the MCU stream that he
Mm.
was supposed to have a really important role, and I would have loved to like see how they do Cyclops justice on training the X-Men, being the leader, go into battle. I mean, that's like his whole arc is supposed to be, and I just hated the fact that they disrespect his entire character and solely
Yeah.
focus on Wolverine. I mean, the X-Men is not always about Wolverine. It's always about one group. It's always
Well,
about one group, one family with different characters.
yeah, and the X Men family is so massive. There are so many stories you can just tell within that universe itself. And Marcus, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly here. You need to start fresh with the X Men. No more focusing on just Wolverine, Professor X, and Magneto. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Marcus.
They
And
haven't like properly sorry, they haven't probably like introduced like the original core five X-Men, which is Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, Iceman, and Angel. I mean, those were the original five. I mean, they
yeah,
haven't really do that properly. I mean, with a movie like First Class, I thought they were gonna do like the same thing they did in the comics. I mean, just ignore like what maybe ignore what the Last Stand did and just like start fresh with it, or create an entirely new franchise. But no, they just still like have a still have a bit of connection with the previous movies. I thought they were going to do that, and I thought honestly Apocalypse would do like a loose adaptation of like X Factor, because you have the original five X-Men fighting Apocalypse. I thought that would be a really cool idea. But I think like with the franchise or with the IP now at the hands of Marvel Studios, I think it will be a perfect opportunity to do the original five X-Men.
well, if that's the case, then I am all for that. And, I would love to see the original five. You know, Xavier with Scott and Jean and Bobby Drake and Hank McCoy and Warren Worthington. I'm perfectly fine with that. And Marcus brings up an interesting point here too. The rumor is that the MCU is adapting Uncanny X-Men. Chris Claremont, they are going back to basics with the X-Men. If that's the direction they're going, Marcus, I'd be good with that, because a lot of people regard Chris Claremont's run, at least until he bowed out and everything, for X-Men in the 80s and 90s, as one of the best runs. That to me was X-Men. It was a damn good run.
They never give like I mean they did like they did X2 or X-Men United, the story
Mhm.
of the God Loves Man Kills storyline. I thought they did it really good, despite the stories being too centered around Wolverine and his backstory, which that could have been just another movie entirely. but
Yeah, it
but
could
then
have.
again, but then again, like the comics really explore like if you remember the scene where like I thought like Claremont really did this like really or, like really open-minded or anything, because that scene with Xavier trying to like leave the X-Men and join Magneto, and that that scene where Scott Summers saying that, hey, we're all human, and all that. I mean, we all make mistakes, but at the end, like he did convince like Xavier to stay with the X-Men and not join Magneto. I love that part of the comics, if you remember.
Yeah, I have to agree because these characters just on their own are so dynamic and so multi-layered and multifaceted that you can go in a dozen different directions and you're not going to get the same story every single time. With Marvel, like I said earlier on, everything with Marvel having full control of all their characters again, Fantastic Four, X-Men, and everybody else, they can really tell the stories that they've always wanted to tell, even if they're adaptations and not just one for one retellings. I am very hopeful and I'm very optimistic for what Marvel does with the X-Men going forward in the MCU continuity. And even if they have their own continuity within the MCU, but also have their own independent continuity as well. I will say this briefly, and then we're probably going to start wrapping up. One series I have been very, very impressed with, and it's a series that I've noticed not a lot of people have been discussing, is the Marvel series Miss Marvel. I am not at all familiar with the comic books. From what I've heard, the comic books were not particularly good. But before I went live this evening, I sat down and watched episode 5 of Miss Marvel. And this has to be, for me, one of the best MCU series that they have done thus far. It introduces a character that is dynamic, that is relatable, that is funny, is quirky, is as complex as Logan is. And from a culture that most of us here in the West are not terribly familiar with. And honestly, I've heard a lot of people, contemporaries and people I'm not terribly familiar with either way, have made the argument that the MCU plateaued with Endgame, and they said that nothing would ever be as good. I respectfully and sometimes very combatively disagree. If you can engage a person like myself who is from the Midwest, who isn't super multicultural per se, but is not anti-multicultural to any extreme, with a character like Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel, and have me engaged and entertained and offer me a thought-provoking and deeply layered story like they've done with Miss Marvel. No. The MCU did not plateau with Endgame. It was the end of one journey and the start of a new one. And if they can reach the levels that they reached with the Wolverine in the MCU, and I have every confidence that they can, then the future for the MCU is very bright. It will probably go for as many years as the fan base is willing to support it. But I hope that at some point James Mangold is brought into the fold of the MCU, that they do give him a story that is worthy of a director and a writer of his talents, and that he's able to deliver another masterpiece like he did with the Wolverine and with Logan. So I will address Marcus's comment, and then we'll have final comments, and then we'll call it a night. So, Ambassador, they turned Stryker into a military guy. I hated that. Actually, Marcus, that never really bothered me, because
Well,
characters are always.
it doesn't really matter though, because it doesn't really matter like what they turn into character. I mean, like you can like turn any kind of character to different kind. Like if it's an iconic character, you don't really have to change that much, because I don't see like William Stryker as a iconic character. I mean, he is a character from from the 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 God Loves Man Kills comic, which is why he is like the main villain. I mean, he's a reverend, but if they turn him into a military guy, and
Mhm.
I think they would have made the character like more interesting, because I think you already read God Loves Man Kills, right? And you know what his backstory is like. It's really dark. Like when I look at it, like, okay, his son was born as a mutant and he killed his own son. Like, oh my god, I don't think this would be good for a PG-13 movie. Yeah, you can understand that where I come
Oh
from.
yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, William Stryker is a minor villain. I mean, a very minor villain. So they had room to play with his character and how he's depicted. So them turning him into a military researcher was never a problem for me. I mean, obviously, we've been talking about the Wolverine tonight, and we've talked about characters like the Silver Samurai and Yuriko Yoshida, and we didn't have massive problems with the fact that Yuriko Yoshida wasn't a antagonist in this film. She was more of a protagonist. She was on the side of Wolverine, and she was even going on her own journey, realizing that she herself had the capacity to lead the corporation that her grandfather established.
I would have loved
And
to see like more of her, to be honest, because
I would
since
have
like she's
too.
like one. Yeah,
Mhm.
she's like one of the most interesting characters. But another thing that I would have loved to see, like, even if they, even if Fox didn't want to do the movie, but we already got like a movie based on like Japanese mutant hero, which is Big Hero 6, but which is what Disney adapted. But have you read the original Big Hero 6? Because I did, because
I never
like
have.
I thought, because the character is very much like different, like than what Disney did in the movies, because they're like more tougher, like like Terminator level tough,
Mhm.
if
I get
I
you.
see it correctly. Yeah, because not only that Big Hero 6 is consists of Japanese mutants, yeah, but of course they did have the Silver Samurai in it, and of course they also have another character which was supposed to be, I think he's the cousin of Mariko in the comics. It's Shiro Yoshida, who is Sunfire. I mean, I thought like
Okay.
Wolverine going to Japan would, yeah, Wolverine going to Japan. I thought like you would meet mutants in Japan, but we only got Yukio, who's like the only Japanese mutant, and
Mhm.
Mariko's father is not a mutant, and of course Mariko is not even a mutant also, and even her boyfriend or former fiance, who she still love, is not even a mutant too. Who I thought like he would eventually become Silver Samurai, but he's dead. So I thought like they were gonna do a new heroic version of Silver Samurai, but I thought like the idea of a Yukio spin-off, or maybe like maybe Big Hero 6 or something in the Fox
Mhm.
X-Men franchise, that would have been a cool idea. But again, like all ideas on like again, the X-Men universe is big. I mean, there are a lot of potential, but
Mhm.
Fox are just lazy to run these other characters they didn't even do, like X Force, X Factor. I mean, New Mutants was like terrible to me, even though the director's like a really big fan. I mean, I didn't even see it, but I heard it was terrible. But and again, like as much as a big world like X-Men is, I
Mhm.
mean, they didn't even have that much potential to do what Marvel Studios did to their characters. That's exactly what they don't do.
Yeah. So, and MJ1 brings up interesting comment here. Yukio was redone in Deadpool 2. I need to watch that. Like I said, I have it on Blu-ray. I've just not um haven't had a chance to watch it, but MJ1 says Yukio was redone in Deadpool 2 as Negasonic Teenage Warhead's girlfriend with completely different powers. I'll have to definitely check that out. I always liked the character of Negasonic Teenage Warhead. She was a firecracker. Well, in this instance, she was a warhead. But
Well, I do, Ambassador. I recommend for you to check two versions of Deadpool 2. There's a theatrical cut, and there's another cut called the Super Duper cut, which has
hmm,
which has like, I don't know, like around extended like 30 minutes, 15 minutes of scenes that were never in the theatrical cut. But I think the theatrical cut is okay. But I like the, I don't know why, I kind of like the super duper cut better. But there are differences. But I recommend you check two versions.
I'll see if I can locate the other one. I've got the regular standard theatrical version on Blu-ray. That's the one I have. So, but I'll definitely see if I can find the other version somewhere down the road. So, I so pay the dude who pressures her into prom sex Deadpool. Yep. Even though she doesn't stay swing that way. Anyways, well, guys and gals, for you ladies that are out there watching, we're going to go and wrap up for tonight. I do want to thank Ferris, Ferris Geeks World, for joining me tonight. Of course, if there's anything me and Ferris did bring up during this review that we missed or something that you want to expand upon, of course, leave it down in the comments. I'll definitely check it out and I'll respond back. I always try to. I do want to let y'all know I will be back tomorrow afternoon, 3:30 Central Time, with the Council of Ones. We're going to be doing something a little special tomorrow afternoon for our Babylon 5 review. We'll be doing a live watch along of one of the B5 films, TV films, River of Souls. So be sure to tune in for that. And I will be back this weekend. I haven't decided what I'm doing as of yet. Me and the missus are possibly going to go see Thor: Love and Thunder, and we'll, of course, be bringing you our thoughts on that as well. So be sure to keep an eye on my social media. Again, thank you all for being here. I hope you all enjoyed the stream. Hope you all had a good time listening to me and Ferris geek out about this. Of course, if you come across this stream and you're not already subscribed to the Ambassador Wing and you enjoyed this stream or any other of the streams or reviews I've done, hit that subscribe button, become a part of this community where we discuss, we debate, and we celebrate pop culture in all its forms. So, but y'all have a great night. Stay ambassadorial. Stay safe out there. And until next time, these are the ambassadors. Signing off.